Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Grace Costa, a commercial photographer of over 2 decades, a photo-based artist and a photography mentor. This podcast opens up a secret diary about the world of the photography industry. We'll bring you inspiring interviews with industry professionals, as well as stories and tips to help you propel through your photography journey, whether you're just starting out or a seasoned pro. Thanks for joining me today. Now let's open the latest diary. Hi friends, welcome back to the Photo Diaries podcast. Wonderful to have you here today. On today's episode, we have a special guest with us, my friend Bec Hughes, all the way over in Brisbane, Queensland. She's also international because she has a gorgeous English accent. But Bec Hughes is actually a creative coach. So for all of you out there, her bio reads, "Where creative meets business, a love story, coaching and mentoring for the give a shit end of town, for brand, graphic and web designers who want to craft a clever creative business, sanity and creative mojo intact." So she has a sense of humor, this girl. So you're going to love chatting with Bec Hughes today. And I just want to say welcome, Bec, to the Photo Diaries podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Grace. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Now, you and I first met, we share the same business coach, but we joined each other on a beautiful retreat in country Victoria mid last year, and we connected really well. And I totally love your vibe and everything you stand for. And I feel like there's plenty of coaches out there, but there aren't many coaches specifically designed to help creative industry. And you help designers, web developers and brands, and probably photographers as well. And you understand how we think and you understand the problems we go through. So I want to say welcome. And would you like to introduce yourself to our guest today?
I will. Thank you, Grace. Look, it's a really interesting one. Maybe I'll introduce myself off the back of your intro and kind of talk about that and the reasons why I say some of those things. So I should first say that, not first and foremost, because it's not the most important thing, but my core business, if you like, is brand strategy and creation. So that's what I do. I've had that business for 9 years, and that's what I do. And that's what I thought I would always do. So unlike, I suppose, a lot of coaches that I hear talking about their businesses, I didn't, always know that I would teach. Like, that wasn't going to be my thing. I don't even see myself as a teacher now, but I didn't see myself as being destined to be a mentor or to work with other creatives. I think what prompted me to do that and why that's become part of my business is because exactly what you say is there is so much content out there, but it's not for creatives and it's not tailored to what creatives need to hear. And again, cliche, I've been through it all, and everyone says that, but I know that there are things that I didn't know that I have learned along the way. Everyone's business is different, but I think there are important messages for creatives. And I hear a lot of happy stuff that gets shared in the generic coaching world that I know doesn't fit with creatives. So that sort of led me into mentoring. It wasn't something that I necessarily was like, yep, I'm going to be a coach for creatives, but it's in response to me feeling that creatives are not hearing the messages that they need to hear.
Yes. And I think your background helps creatives like myself, especially when you talk about customer experience type of stuff. Other coaches don't understand the customer pain points and the customer interactions that graphic designers or creatives have. I used to work in a graphic design team. I was audio-visual department and we had graphic designers. And I remember thinking how much I would hate to be a graphic designer because of the customer experience. They're always coming to you with, "Oh, this is the last edit, I promise." And then the deadline is like 5 p.m. And then they come again. "Oh, there's another spelling mistake. Can you please just change this?" And I used to think, oh my God, I couldn't handle that.
Yeah. I always joke that it would be an amazing job if there just weren't any clients. And I'm like half joking. Yeah. And look, I think I should probably touch on my background in that sense, because before I started my business, I worked in what I would describe as corporate agencies. So I'm from the UK originally. So I worked started out as a designer, but I moved into brand strategy specifically. So moved a little bit out of design, if you like. And so a big part of my career has focused on brand strategy, but working really closely with the creative team. And part of brand strategy is that you work very closely with the client, perhaps more so than a lot of designers do in an agency environment. So designers tend to be, particularly in that studio environment, at the brunt, at the kind of pointy end of, right, well, the client's just phoned and they want these changes. And all the SHIT just gets pushed downhill. And the designer's just the one that's told to suck it up. It's what the client wants. That's your job, essentially. And so I've been on all of those sides of that kind of triangle, if you like, of, I've been the creative who's just been told to suck it up. I've been the person fronting up to the client, who then is the kind of very often the middle person. So I know what that relationship with the client needs to be like as well. And then, I have worked client side and I've worked in strategy. So I know what clients need and what they're trying to achieve. So those things come together to give you quite a different perspective. And I think the biggest and most important thing for me is that designers don't have to be the people at the bottom of the tree, just pushing the pixels, actioning the changes, never questioning the feedback. That's my biggest mission, I think, is to change that
Yes.
Designers feel much more in control of their creative product.
And we can learn a lot from your experience and a lot from this mission that you're on. It can help photographers as well. So friends, keep tuned in because this episode is for us, I promise. Okay. So we are going to talk about communicating your value. All right, you got to explain this to us because I guess value can mean many different things, but let's talk about it. What should we be talking about when referring to our value as a photographer?
The key thing about value, the default when you start talking about value is, it's how I price my services, or it's how I sell in my pricing. But I think what's important about the value conversation is it actually becomes before your pricing, because when you position yourself as being valuable, when you really show your value, then issues of pricing become less important. They never go away. And I'm not the kind of mentor or coach that sits here and says, you do all these things, you tick these boxes, and you'll never have to have another pricing conversation again. That's not the case. But when you start to really lean into your value, you become more confident about your pricing, and it does become less of an issue for your client because they start to see why they should buy from you. So when you boil down communicating your value, it's actually about communicating what sets you apart, why you're different, why you are going to help them achieve what they want to achieve ultimately. So that's, I think, the key point, or the top of the tree, if you like, when it comes to communicating your value. It's really about talking about what sets you apart, what makes you different.
Okay, so let's talk about what makes you different. So photographers might think, oh, well, I do personal branding just the same as everyone else. Personal branding can only be done a certain way. I'm the same as the next guy or girl. How do I know what sets me apart besides my price?
Yes. And as soon as it is only your price, that's when things get tricky, because that's when you are just it's a race to the bottom. Who's going to be the cheapest? But it's never the case that you are the same as everyone else. That's never the case. There are always things that set you apart. And part of it is a confidence thing in finding those things. And then it's also about understanding how you talk about those things in a way that makes them important to the client. And I think that's a really key difference when it comes to talking about value. Talking about value isn't just about talking about yourself, about what you're good at, about what you love. When it gets really good is when you can turn that into messaging that lands with your client, which they go, yeah, that's what I need. Yes, that's who I want to work with. Yes, that's the kind of person I want to be. And therefore I want to work with them because they're going to help me be that person, or show up as that person, or be perceived as that person. So when you start to talk about your value and finding ways to talk about it, you always need to think about it in the context of, in what ways is this meaningful to the client? In what ways is this ticking a box for them? giving them something they need or want.
So like solving their problem?
Solving their problem, and it sort of goes bigger than just the problem. It's also kind of meeting their desires and giving them something they really want. So you can talk about, oh, look, I studied photography and I've got all these qualifications, and this is the equipment I use. This is I'm a Canon person and I have all the Canon equipment. That's great. Amazing. Well done, you. What does that mean to the client? The fact that you studied in that place or the qualifications that you have, what does that mean for them? How is that going to make their experience better? How is that going to make the result better? You've always got to tag on that extra bit, which is what I call the so what story, which I've talked about a few times, which is this idea of when you tell someone something, their immediate response is always going to be, oh, so what? So what? What does that mean for me? And they might not say that out loud. They're probably just thinking it. So whenever you're thinking about your messaging, whatever you're talking about, if you challenge yourself to go, okay, so what? Why is this meaningful to the client? Why are they going to want to know this? Yes, I talk to designers a lot, and designers will talk about things like font choices or color palette. And it's like, oh, great. Well done, you. Yeah, that's a really great design call that you made. And as a designer, I understand that. But why is that meaningful to the client? You've got to tell them that it means that it's going to help them position themselves in a certain way, that they might elevate their brand so they can command a better price point, that those particular color choices set them apart in their industry from all the other people, other accountants or whatever it might be. So you've got to tell them why it's important to them.
So how do we showcase our expertise and specialism? So what is specialism anyway?
Very often when I start talking about value and I talk about it to my clients, they're like, okay, that's great. I need to communicate my value. Well, where do I start? You're telling me that it's not just about my work.
Yes.
Because something I do talk about quite often, which isn't necessarily music to any creative's ears, is that it's not necessarily your work that sets you apart. So, there are lots of great creatives that might design in a certain genre. There are lots of great photographers who might shoot in a certain style. So if your work alone is what you're relying on to set you apart, it's not going to be enough. So that's why we have to have this value conversation. So then it's like, okay, well, if it's not my work, what is it? Well, there's a couple of things that I share. I mean, there's lots of ways, but there are some core things. And one of them, like you said, is to talk about your specialism. And there's lots of words for specialism: niche, your superpower, your special gift, whatever it might be, what you love doing, your wheelhouse. It's just your thing. And I think the point with your specialism is that when you start focusing in on that, whatever it may be, and I'll talk about what it might be in a sec, but when you start to talk about that, what you become is a big fish in a small pond. Instead of a small fish splashing around in a huge pond of lots of other photographers talking in very similar ways and doing very similar things. So when you're the photographer that does all the things, you shoot people, place, whatever you shoot lots of different things, then there's going to be lots of other photographers you're competing against.
Yes.
But when you start to zero in on your specialism, then by definition, you will be competing against fewer photographers.
But photographers worry that if they niche down, they won't get the work because they're narrowing down the amount of clients they're going to get, as opposed to doing architecture, landscapes, corporate, babies. There's a lot of photographers with all that on their website and they think they're in a bigger pool.
Yeah, 100%. I strongly disagree, because I think that comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to a bit of the old woo-woo and that abundance versus scarcity mindset. Is there enough work? And of course, there is always enough work. It's just who's getting that work. And I think it's not just photographers who worry about that. Well, if I become too specialist, there won't be enough work for me. That's something that everyone worries about. But I think by narrowing what you do, you become more of the go-to for a certain thing. So instead of competing, every photography job, you might be competing against, let's say, for argument's sake, 20 different photographers. When you niche down, you're competing against maybe one, or maybe you're the go-to.
Because you get known, and that becomes part of your brand. Like, you are the corporate photographer in Canberra, that's who we go to. And everybody starts to know you as that. Whereas if you're a jack of all trades, it's hard to pinpoint you as a brand. What does Grace do? What does Jeff do,
Yeah, and that's a really important part of it, is that people know how to talk about you. When someone says Grace Costa, they know it's the lady that shoots beautiful equine photography. Well, that's what I think of.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because that's my memorable part of my brand, and what sets me apart is that I also shoot horses. But in my space, I'm known as the corporate photographer and the personal branding photographer in Canberra. So yeah, I guess you also have talked about that in the past. What sets you apart? What's a memorable part of your brand that other people won't have? And for me, it's horses.
Yeah, and it's something you can lean into. So I think that's the thing with the specialism, is that, I mean, if you narrow yourself down too far, of course, if your niche becomes something so exclusive that there's only one or two clients out there that would possibly want to buy what you buy, then that's in itself the trick with choosing a specialism or talking to a specialism, is that you make sure that you balance that very specific and clear message, and that people know who you're the go-to for, but it doesn't become so niche that it's too obscure.
Yes.
I mean, some people have made a great business out of being very obscure. And I'll give you an example of this that I saw only the other day. I don't know how good this business is. I can't attest to it.
What is it?
I was just driving to the shops the other day and I saw the garage doorman.
Okay, what's that?
Well, I don't know, but I'm assuming he specializes in just doing garage door installs and repairs. And he doesn't do any other kind of doors, Grace. He doesn't repair anything else. He's just doing the garages. And I thought to myself at that moment, that is a really good example of a niche, because it's really specific. When you've got that, there's plenty of people who've got garage doors.
Yes. Nearly everyone has a garage door.
Nearly everyone.
Nearly everyone, yeah.
Unless you live in the inner west of Sydney, then you haven't got a garage door at all. You've got nowhere to park. But that was just, for me, a really good example of a niche or a specialism. There's enough of a market for it, but it's so clear what that is. When someone's got an issue with a garage door, they know that he's the guy.
Yes.
It's really clear. You don't go to just odd job handyman over there that does a bit of everything. The other thing with the specialism, the beauty of it, is that it positions you as an expert in an area. And you said it just now. You mentioned, being the jack of all trades. Well, okay, you can do a bit of everything, but what are you good at? Like, what are you really going to be the expert at? And I think by really leaning into something specific, you become that person that can be trusted in that field.
And also you become that person that shows that they understand that niche inside and out.
Absolutely.
They can tackle any problem within that niche that is thrown their way, because they've worked in that niche for so many years and they've understood it and crafted it so well that they've become an expert. You
become trusted for it.
Yeah.
So, and look, I think the thing with a niche is that very often the default is that, okay, it's a target market. So my niche is being a family photographer. My niche is being a newborn baby photographer. So it can be very much perceived as choosing a group or an audience. But I think a niche can be a style. So you might say, yes, I shoot landscape, portraits, place, residential, whatever, but you shoot in such a specific style that becomes your specialism.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be limited to a type of audience, for example. It can be many things. It can be a very editorial style that you bring to it, or it can be a particularly artistic style, or a brutalist style, or whatever it might be. There's lots of different ways into a specialism that you can own.
So going back to value, what are another aspect of it that we need to know about?
Okay. So we've talked about the specialism.
Yeah.
I think another thing, we kind of alluded to it when we were talking about the so what story, is to talk about your impact and your results. So when it comes to sharing your value, and it's definitely something that creatives, no judgment from me, do default to, is sharing their beautiful work. Then they forgot to say about the impact of that gorgeous work.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for photography. So it's making sure that whenever you're talking about anything in your business, but particularly about your work, it's also finding the story of what impact it had for your client. And when that comes to photography, that might be that, even if we're talking about portrait photography, like you, corporate portrait photography, that might be that you help them really clearly communicate their brand positioning through their photography. It might be that you gave their team this elevated confidence in themselves and how they appear through the website and how they're represented in the business.
Yeah.
It might be that it's helped a business change their positioning and what they're all about because they want to move from one particular service to something different. So talking about your impact and what you did for a business is a really important part of creativity. It's taking it from the creative conversation. When I talk to designers, again, it's that I chose these colors for these reasons. I chose these fonts. Okay, that's the start of the case study. The end of the case study is, and this was the business outcome.
Yes.
Or this was the human outcome. So if you're a family photographer, what was the outcome for them? Well, they captured these memories and they shared it with all the rest of their family who loved and adored it. And it was something really special for a grandparent that received it, whatever it might be. But you've got to go to that end result, the impact.
And would we communicate that end result and impact in our captions in social media or on our blog?
In any chance you get. Okay. So if you share your work and your portfolio on your website, which is probably very likely, you might, and this doesn't have to be War and Peace, by the way. You don't have to do a long, you don't have to do a long story about what impact you created. Sometimes you can just allude to it in a few words. But and also, it doesn't have to be something militant. You don't have to say to yourself, every time I share my work, I have to talk about the impact. But I would certainly think you should do it more often than not. But it comes back to storytelling as well then. How do you create a story around that impact that's more interesting? So, think about it from your perspective. When someone's talking about, it might be a social media manager. Oh, I got 10% increase in engagement. And you go, okay, that was a bit, I get it, but it was a bit boring. But if they wrapped a story around that about, the response that had from their client and how good they felt and what results they got from that, and they turned that into a narrative, it's much more engaging.
They could start with, if they had personal branding photos, I came to the photographer super nervous. I hate being in front of the camera. I never look good in photos, but the photographer I worked with was so, gentle and kind with me. She made me feel so relaxed. I actually love all the photos that we took as a result, and I'm confident to share them online and share them throughout my brand because now I feel like she really captured me and my personality, and I can share that and feel confident going forward.
That's perfect. Just transcribe that, folks, and put that with all of your photos. But yes, share it with your imagery that you share in your portfolio. Share it as a caption on your socials. Share it if you put out a testimonial. In any way that you can, when you talk about your work, talk about the impact that it had. And that's emotional impact. How did it make the end recipient feel? But also as well, there is a little bit of the tangible impact. How did it support their business? How did it help them achieve their goals for their business too?
Yeah, awesome. Love that. Really, really love that. Really valuable. Okay, what's next?
Okay, well, another one, which is a really interesting one for me, and it's something that I am mildly obsessed with, I have to be honest. And that is your method and your models. Because I think there is so much, I always say there's magic in the method, right?
Okay.
And I work with lots of different clients in my brand, in the brand consultancy part of my business. And one of the things we focus on a lot around that value communication is how do you do things? What's your particular way of doing things that might be different to your competitors? So it's work that I do a lot in my brand work, as well as with my mentoring clients, with designers, to express how they do things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this is that there's a very traditional accepted way of describing any creative process. So for a photographer, it's usually, okay, well, I send out the questionnaire and I make sure that there's a plan and they know what props to bring. And then we shoot on the day, and then I'll send them my 100 selects and they'll select 10. And then I'll do the retouching. Do people still say dust and scratches? Is that even
No. No, they don't say dust and scratches. Oh, that's 20 years old, that one.
I'm literally showing my age.
Me too. Don't worry, we're the same age.
Remember we used to send the transparency and it'd be like, the dust and scratches.
Yep.
Okay, not dust and scratches. But yeah, so then there's a retouching process, and then you send the final images bundled up and you go, okay, that's a process. And you'll hear that process and again, this is about setting yourself apart, right? Because every single photographer will describe a very similar process. Mm-hmm. It's like every designer will describe, okay, there's the discovery phase, probably again, a questionnaire, there's concept, we'll choose one concept and we'll do some refinements, and then we'll roll it out and we'll do your website and your brochures and everything else. And there's this process. But I know that with every creative, there are nuances and little things that they do in that method that they have added over time to solve problems. So for example, there was a time when a client wasn't really clear on what they should bring to a shoot. So they've added a certain part to their questionnaire to make sure that they help that client eke that out. Or there might be things they do on a shoot to help people feel more comfortable, or specific ways they get people to stand or to act, or where they get them to put their hands. And I know this is one for you, Grace. So when it comes to your methodology, this is about diving a bit deeper into the way you do it and the way you have developed your process over time that is unique to you. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that that's going to be a groundbreaking, brand new way of doing it. That's not the point. The point is that there will be nuances and things that you have added value through because of the learnings you've gained through just doing your job every day that have made the experience better. For example, there might be some way that you help your client make their selects. This is what you should be looking for. This is how you make sure you build a really usable library. So these are my tips when you make your selects. So that it's about really diving into each and every little part of your process, step by step, and mapping that out and recognizing, and we've touched on this, Grace, don't assume that what you know is what everybody knows. Don't assume that what you do is what everybody does.
Yeah. Don't
assume that just because it seems small and innocuous to you, that it's not actually something really valuable, important. Mm-hmm. So by eking out your process and starting to talk about each of those points, why you do it that way, really talks to your value and how you've used your experience over time to do things a certain way.
And that could also help a client connect to you when you share how your process looks. A client might look at you versus another photographer and go, oh, I love the way her process seems a little bit more relaxed. Absolutely. She seems more my style of girl.
Or more rigorous. And that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. Or I'm very nervous and I don't know how I need to position myself. And so if they see something in your process that addresses that, then they will connect with you.
Yes.
But it gives them that sense of connection, but it also gives people confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Confidence.
So when I talk about my brand process, so, my method for how I work in brand strategy, which is unique to me and it's how I do it, I don't just go, oh, yes, I do brand strategy. Oh yeah, we'll come up with your personality traits and we'll talk about your positioning and then we'll do a logo. I don't do, I get into the detail about how that's going to work. What steps are we going to go through? What models am I going to use? And that level of detail around the process gives people confidence that there's rigor, that I know what I'm doing.
Definitely.
So that's the first part of your model or your methodology. The second part is naming it and claiming it. And this is where me as a brand consultant, goes off on one, because brand is all about naming and claiming things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Creating brand names or badging things, bundling things up gives them an immediate perception of value. So I don't just talk about my brand process, I talk about the brand compass. Immediately it becomes a thing of a value. I talk about my brand blue sky workshop. That's a model that I use. It's a process I go through. I've named it. So immediately it's not just a workshop. It's not just a Zoom session. It's a thing that has a name and it has a value. It has a life of its own, essentially.
Okay. So what do we have to name and claim?
So your method, your way of doing things. If you've got a certain way that you might set people up and help them prepare for the photo shoot,
yes,
you name that. Is it, the shoot success guide or whatever it might be? I made that up, by the way. It's not my best work.
We will run with it. It's good enough.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. Trademark. But you just by giving something an identity. So giving your method, your approach, an identity, a way of talking about it. Oh yeah, Grace, she uses the shoot success method.
Yes, I understand.
What, you don't know about that? Oh my goodness, it was so good. I really got these amazing images because of that method. And it becomes another way that people talk about you for your specialism. They talk about you for your impact and your outcomes. And they talk about you because of your method, because it's different. It sets you apart.
Yes, gotcha.
Yeah.
Understand.
And it doesn't have to be this grand, but you don't need to write a 300-page book about your new photography method that you've invented. It's not that deep. It's just about thinking about there's a way that you do it, and it will be very slightly nuanced, and it will be because of the experiences and the problems you've come up against in working with clients, and it's how you've solved those problems. An email that you might have added into the process that just confirms something at a certain point. It's all of those things. But the key is naming it and claiming it.
We can definitely do that. Is there another one to follow that?
The other one, and again, I think this is so important when it comes to setting you apart, because again, creatives go, well, what's different about me? I'm a designer like every other designer. I'm a photographer like every other photographer. So an important one for me is talking about your perspectives and your beliefs, particularly on your industry.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example in the photography industry. There's a particular photographer that I follow, and she talks a lot about, she wants to shine a light on your imperfections as the subject matter of your photography. She talks about your perceived imperfections, because they're not imperfections at all, as being the thing that will create the most connection in your photography, in your images. When you're very natural in yourself and it's not posed and you're not perhaps, overly
polished
or polished or done. We've all seen those photos when you see people, they've had their photos taken, you see them in real life and you're sort of like, huh? How many years ago did you have that shot? And so she talks a lot about that need for authenticity, or that opportunity for authenticity, and how people should actually not be negative about, oh, don't show that side because that's not my good side, or don't show the moles on my neck, or whatever it might be, but actually embracing those things, because what do we want to do through photography? We want to create some kind of connection.
Yes.
And her perspective is that creates greater connection. Whereas there would be a school of thought in parts of photography that it's all about perfection and retouching, and you want to show this perfect image, and that's perhaps goes on less, but it still goes on. And so that's a perspective that she shares that sets her apart, and she talks about that very passionately.
Yes.
So talking about how you see things in your industry, and maybe where you disagree with things, the way things are done, or how you think things can be done better or differently, is a very good way to demonstrate, to evidence your value.
Yeah, understood. That's excellent.
And I'm sure there's a lot of things from your perspective, Grace, the way you talk about photography, that would be those kinds of things. And I think very often as creatives, we're doing it and we don't even realize we're doing it. Or we're thinking it, we don't want to say it in case we upset someone.
Yes, and I came across it when I was getting my copywriting done for my website, and naturally the copywriter wanted to say, Grace captures yourself naturally, the natural you. And I questioned that for a little bit, and we sort of really dug deep and questioned the wording. And because I didn't want to make it sound like naturally you, if you're sitting in a chair, you're going to be slumped. You're going to be naturally slumped over, and your posture is not going to be great. But I'm the type of photographer that will place you on the chair and make sure you're sitting upright. Make sure your bottom is right at the back of the chair so that your posture is straighter, but you can still look natural. And I'll actually show you how to be natural within a pose. So yeah, I guess that helped me understand how I can sort of be different in that way.
Yeah, and that's your perspective. And I think that's the important thing, is that no one perspective is more valid than another. Because when it comes to, your audience, people looking for a photographer, people want to be seen in different ways. For some people, that really raw, slouching in a chair authenticity is what they want.
Yeah.
For some people, actually, that's not what they want. They want the middle ground. They want to have that poise. So everybody's looking for something different. So it's not about you adapting and saying what you think the market wants to hear or falling in with that. It's actually about you owning that perspective, whether it's the way everybody else thinks or not.
Yeah.
By owning it, I almost guarantee that you will find people. And again, this links to the specialism in a way, because it's kind of narrowing down what you're about. And you will find the person that clicks with, and it's not just one person, there will be more than one, but you're more likely to click very deeply with a specific group of people than click a little bit with a lot of people.
Yes.
And that's where having that strong view on things and sharing that proudly is a really crucial part of sharing your value.
I love that. I think all those tips and areas of expertise you shared there are something that I think photographers listening could do some homework around. They could go back and listen, write down the topics, and nut out all that sort of intricacies for themselves so that they can go forward with their brand and share a little bit more confidently throughout their communications, where they stand, what they're doing, method, impact, results, niche, so much there.
Yeah. And I think that's the point, is only you can do that for yourself. So yes, there is no answer that I can't sit here and go, right, well, this is the specialism you should pick and talk about. These are the perspectives you should have. This is the impact you should be saying that you have, because it's different for everybody. So I can pose the question to you. Okay, well, what is the impact you have? What are your perspectives that might be controversial or different, or a way you think things should be in the industry? So you can ask the question, and it's your job then to answer that question for you.
Yes. We're going to do our homework, Bec. Thank you.
Send it in and I'll mark it.
Yes. Okay. So when we're talking about brand personality, because this is still under the same umbrella, how do we describe our brand personality? Is it our individual personality, or is it separate, or is it a mixture of both?
This is such an interesting question, Grace. And it's an important one, because I think it is one that people wrestle with, particularly when you are the brand, right?
Yes.
You as the individual, the creative, is the brand. And I think when that is the case, when your personal brand and your business brand are so closely aligned, then your own personality traits will be quite deeply reflected through your brand. Because if they're not, there's going to be a disconnect. Because when you're the producer and the personality you put out into the world through your brand doesn't then align with the person that shows up on the day, that's not going to work, is it? There's going to be a disconnect there. That buyer, that client isn't going to get what they were expecting. So I think when you're talking about a very personal brand or an individual-led business, like for us creatives, then yes, I think the two are very, very closely linked. Having said that, there might be certain personality traits that you want to dial up in your brand. So, okay, you might be a very or reasonably extroverted, positive person, but you have your rubbishy days, and you might describe yourself, as I do, as an introverted extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of your brand, you want to lean more into that bubbly extroverted, because that's who you're going to be in your business.
Got you.
A little bit different. In your personal life, you might want to put your scruffies on and sit watching Netflix all day on a Saturday. And that's what you choose to do. Mm-hmm. So you sometimes might make a choice about certain attributes or personality traits that you want to dial up in your brand, because that's the kind of people you want to work with in your business.
Yes, this makes sense.
Does it? Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. I haven't had anyone describe it like this. So yeah, keep going.
So I think what's important is that, we can get really hung up on, my brand has to be this exact replica of me as a person. And I think there is definitely, like, if I always think of it like there's two circles. There's your brand, and then there's you as the person, and the two kind of overlap. And it's just how much they overlap that is what creates your outward going brand. So not every aspect of your personality as a human needs to come through in your brand.
Understood. Yeah.
You don't have to go, right, this is everything about me, and therefore I need to witness all of that in my brand. You just pick the things that are the most important to how you want to connect with your audience and the experience you want to create for your audience.
The experience as well. Yeah, that's something really important to think about too.
Yeah, it really, obviously when you're talking about bigger brands, their personality is more constructed around an audience, because there might be hundreds of people that work for that. It's not going to reflect one single person.
Yes.
But when it comes to our kind of brands, where it is very much us, I think that congruency and that authenticity between the person they're going to get on the day, who's going to turn up with the camera, who you're going to be, and what they felt when they went to your website and what they read in your social media, that there is a clear thread in that. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't dial up certain things, because you say to yourself, in my business, I really want to focus more on my corporate serious side, or I want to focus on my really bubbly extroverted side.
That's awesome. I think that's also something we could question within ourselves and add to our planning and homework.
Yeah. And look, I think with personality, very often as creatives, we're holding back a bit on that too. Brand personality is a big opportunity, again, to set yourself apart. And we might hold back a bit in the same way we might hold back on, I want to talk about that perspective. I don't want to talk about that. I do want to pose people in a chair and for them to have good posture, because that's not how it's done these days. It has to be really natural. So I think we might hold back a bit on those personality traits because we think they might be polarizing. We think they'll put people off. And you know what? If you put some people off, you're winning.
Because you're narrowing down the people that are meant for you.
Yeah, absolutely. If your brand personality isn't, someone said this the other day on socials, they said Marmite, but if I say Marmite, everyone's going to go, huh? So if your brand personality isn't like Vegemite,
yes,
in the sense that some people will love you and some people will just be like, oh no, they're not for me. Not doing its job. It's not strong enough.
It's not strong enough. It's not clear enough. There's not enough clarity. Yeah, I agree with you. Because if you're for everybody, you're actually for nobody.
That is like literally the quote of the day, Grace.
Yes. Ding.
Tick.
Okay, so let's talk about how we can go about sharing our values in our business a little bit.
Obviously, there's the how in terms of like literally the mediums by which you're going to share your value. And, that's essentially marketing. That's just you getting out there, making sure your value is clear on your website, making sure you're talking about it all the time on your socials, looking for, community building, network building opportunities through which you can then communicate your value. So marketing is obviously the vehicle by which you're going to share your value. Mm-hmm. But in terms of how you do it effectively, there are a couple of things. We've touched on it already. The first one for me is storytelling. So when I say stories, everybody rushes to, Instagram stories. I get it. Yep. I can do that. I can bake a banana bread and share that in my stories. But But it's not that. What I'm talking about is what we touched on earlier, which is that creating a narrative around the value point that you want to share. So let's say you want to talk about your qualifications and your history and what your working history.
Yeah.
Well, yes, you can list all your qualifications, or you can create a narrative about, okay, well, when I worked at this particular studio, or when I was studying, this was, and you can actually build more of an interesting narrative about maybe an event that happened, a learning that you had, a pivotal moment for you, a realization, a low point, a high point, whatever it is. You can create a narrative about a period in time, a moment in time, let's say, that illustrates your point.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I used to be a photographer for the military, the Department of Defense. I could illustrate or tell a story around the two mentors were older gentlemen who were my supervisors in my team, and how they guided me to become a better photographer outside of my qualification as degree as photographer. They really drew out what it meant to be a working photographer and all the skills I needed to have.
Absolutely. It's a human story, because you go, oh, who were those people? You kind of like feel that empathy of you in that relationship with them. So it just creates a much more interesting, it's more engaging, it's more interesting. So I'll give you an example of, so I've got a like monthly newsletter. It's new, and I won't even say why it's new. But in that newsletter, one of the things I wanted to talk about was how people can make particularly their excerpts, or how they talk on stories, a little bit less drab. You know, that thing where they go, oh, I'm just popping in here, or today I want to talk about, and like, it's all well intentioned, but the minute someone opens it like that, I kind of switch off.
Happy Tuesday. I just wanted to pop in and have a chat about.
Right. So I wanted to illustrate the point about sizzling starters. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So the opener for my whole email was, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to quote myself properly now, was that I had to climb a tree and I had only rusty nails to hang on to. That was just the first line. And so you go, what's that about? Who's climbing the tree? What about, you've got an image in your head of someone hanging off a tree.
That's a hook. You hooked us in, yes.
It's a sizzling starter. And the point of it was that my son had been on camp that week. And when we left to walk home, I'd gone and picked him up and he'd been dropped off on the bus. When we were walking home, that's one of the first things he said to me. And he said that because he knew it would get my attention. I'd be like, hold on, what's this about? Why are you being made to climb trees and hang on to nails? What's going on?
And have you had your recent tetanus shot?
Yes. And, he was talking about how he threw himself into adventure, and that was to get up to a flying fox, and he did it, and he was so proud of himself. So I was using that story of me and my son walking home and what he said to me to illustrate the point of a sizzling starter. I didn't just go, you know what? I'm just popping in here today to tell you that when you say I'm just popping in here today, it's really boring.
Yeah, exactly.
I used a story, an actual event that happened, to illustrate the point, to create a narrative around it. Because not only do you make it more interesting, you demonstrate it in action. You kind of show it out there in the wild, what I actually mean. I'm showing you what I mean.
And you can also start a sizzling starter, or use a sizzling starter by telling a story partway through the story, or starting with the end at the beginning.
Absolutely. It's like when people say, this was the lowest point in my life, in my entire life, or I never thought I would be able to come back from this. And you go, oh, okay, I'm interested.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Trick, but it's more interesting. It makes for a better read. So the point about storytelling is that it's not just about relaying facts. It's about wrapping a story around it. So you go, okay, what's the message I want to communicate? That's the first thing. I know what I want to say today. What story could I tell that would illustrate that? So I might, I know I want to talk about how designers might over-deliver, give too many photographs in their first cut, or over-deliver on concepts. So I want to talk about that. But I'm not just going to say that. I'm going to go and find a story or an example in my history, maybe, where maybe I've over-delivered and the client got overwhelmed and it derailed the whole project because they didn't choose.
Yes.
Story around that, because it makes it real. It shows the impact. Yes. So that's what I mean about storytelling. So storytelling is a really great way to illustrate your value.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Next.
We've talked about the so what story as well. So I won't dwell on that, but coming back to the why are you saying it is really important. And it's the why to your audience, to them. Why is this important to them? Why should they give a monkeys about this point?
Okay. Yep.
So that, again, a really important part of sharing your value is saying why this thing that you're talking about is important to them.
That's a good question for us to ask. Yep.
Look, another way with sharing your value is to take a position of education. So that might be to share, we talk a bit about freebies and e-books and that kind of thing, but looking for opportunities to teach people something. Because that demonstrates your value, doesn't it? So even, you might do a post that says, did you know if you stand slightly 3/4, that makes for a much better photograph for these reasons. I made that up. That might not even be true, Grace.
Yes.
Or if you don't know what to do with your hands, how about you try these 3 different things? So it's a little bit of the 3 tips for XYZ, but it's just finding ways to teach that demonstrate what you know. That's what I'm doing right now. I know, one of my areas of expertise is about talking about value and about bringing brand value out. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm using a way of educating, of sharing that knowledge.
Yes. And I guess I'm doing that too on my podcast, or, sharing lives with people. Instagram.
Absolutely.
Lives. Yeah.
You can do that in small ways with your posts and with your content, with blogs. And you can do that in bigger ways through doing webinars or, going on podcasts, creating freebies, like creating workbooks. There's lots of ways that you can educate. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can also be little snippets.
Absolutely. Wow. So much gold, Bec. I'm so excited by all this new information and new ways of, turning our brand upside down and elevating it some more and pulling out all the little gems within our brand. And now you've showed us how to communicate it better and how to dig deep into what we've already got, our own asset, pull out all the little nuggets that you've mentioned today so that we can share it along, do it better.
That's exactly, like, value is a process of deep dive. If you feel that you're surface level, if you're talking about a process that everyone talks about, or if your brand personality is a bit vanilla, if it's surface level, then by default, it's not communicating value. So pulling out your value is a process of deep diving. And sometimes it's going into areas where you go, oh, this feels a bit controversial now. I'm not sure I want to say that. I'm not sure I want to share that perspective. Or am I gutsy enough to bring out this personality trait that I feel actually is a really good reflection of me, or is what I want to say? So it can be a bit of an excavation as well, and a deep dive into, if you're feeling safe, it's a very good chance you're playing safe with communicating your value, aka you're not doing it well enough.
Yes, I agree. And also, you're playing like every other photographer and you're just in the same camp.
Absolutely. You're the small fish in the big pond.
Exactly, as you described. And that also painted a picture of actually a fish in a pond.
Yeah, right? Straight away.
You could even start collecting stories on, say, your notes in your phone or just in your diary or whatever. Start collecting the stories throughout your experience, throughout your brand, throughout your processes, your methods. And when something comes to mind, keep it in a file so that when you are starting to recraft your brand, your messaging and your experience and your value, you've got it all in one place so that you can keep building on it. And also, it would probably pay to maybe do this exercise with another photographer or another person in business that you trust, and that can see your business through a different lens and maybe bring some awareness and say, oh, Bec, but I notice you are really good at this. And that shines through when you communicate and when you share things online. Maybe you should start delving into that a bit more. So having somebody else's perspective might help.
Absolutely. The hardest thing in the world is to recognize your own value and to see it, because we don't, like I said before, you think that everybody knows what you know. And I
Mm,
said to you, the biggest fear for any coach is that you're teaching people to suck eggs, but the realization that not everybody knows what you know is an important one.
yeah.
So we can't always see that value. So having someone else to, the reason that I coach creatives is because someone else said to me, you actually know quite a lot about this. Have you ever thought about coaching creatives? I'm like, no, what are you talking about?
But you're so natural at it, Bec.
It takes someone else sometimes to highlight something to you. You go, okay, all right. And maybe you sometimes need to sit with it. And sometimes it takes a real leap of faith to then go out and start talking about it and to take that risk and to put
Mm,
it out there in those ways. But if it feels a little bit uncomfortable, if it feels a bit risky, if it feels a little bit polarizing, chances are it's a really good message.
I agree. That also happened to me, as somebody was telling you that why aren't you coaching creatives? Someone started saying to me, when am I starting my podcast? And I was like, no, podcasts aren't for me. I just listen to them. And then it just sat with me for a few months. And then suddenly I started to believe that I could start a podcast and that I had something to say. And then I dug into my past, and I've been a photographer for over 20 years. And I thought, oh my God, if anyone's to talk about the photography industry, it's me.
Yeah,
I have a place there. I belong behind this mic talking about the industry.
absolutely. And I think in many ways, there, Grace, you've hit the nail on the head when it comes to communicating your value. And I hate to say it because, it's an overdone thing in some ways, but we've talked a lot about the practical stuff here, but there is a mindset to it as well.
Definitely.
There is a mindset and an attitude that is something that sometimes you just got to give yourself a little bit of a shove to do it and to start talking about your value. And it does feel uncomfortable because when you're a creator, what you put out into the world is a part of you. And it's something that you very often look for validation from. And it's something that it feels very uncomfortable to be criticized about. So naturally, as creatives, we fear judgment because it's very personal when we're judged. It's something we've sometimes spent a lot of time doing or a lot of love doing. It might be a 20 years experience, but there is a mindset to it to get past that and go, actually, no, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to share it and I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk about it and see how it lands.
And it doesn't even have to be perfect. One of my sayings is just start scrappy. Like I started my podcast very scrappy. I didn't, know how to do podcasting. And I thought, I'm just going to start scrappy and I'll perfect it along the way.
Yeah.
Just like when you're recrafting all your value communications, start scrappy and improve it a lot along the way within time.
100%. Start putting something out there. Don't wait until you go, oh, yeah, that's now the perfect thing. I've sat on this for 12 months and now I can start talking about it. The more you actually talk about it, the more you will change and tweak it. And that's a good thing. Change, we know as creatives, the creative process is an evolution. And
yes.
So should the way you talk about your value be an evolution. You might start talking about something and that might lead to something a bit deeper or a bit more focused or a bit more niched. You don't have to have completely crafted your niche right now before you start talking. Let it evolve, and it's okay to do that.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for that permission, Bec. Now, can you tell us, as we wrap up, how can people work with you? And also, can you share the downloads you've got available at the moment that might be useful that we can get from your website?
This wasn't intentional, Grace, but it sounds like a really cheesy thing now. Well, actually, I do happen to have a download about communicating your value.
Oh, damn.
Not intentional, I promise.
And it's not intentional that I did my research.
Oh, Grace, honestly, you're too good. Look, as I said in the beginning, helping creatives of all genres, whether it's photographer, designer, interior designer, anyone in the creative space, to be more confident to share their value is really important to me. And I know that it's something that people struggle with. and they think there's this silver bullet or this holy grail that they need to find, that there's just one way of doing it. There's lots of ways of doing it. And I've come up with 50.
That's a lot. We won't run out.
It is a lot, actually. And some of it's very practical, and some of it is perhaps a little bit more around mindset, for example. So I just collated lots of ideas, and it's really about inspiration and ideas of ways that you can share your value. And it can be really some practical things like we've talked about today. So there's lots of things in there. So if you want to grab a copy of that, you can do that. Maybe, Grace, you can share the link for that.
I will.
And also, I've got a freebie, because also I think where a lot of creatives struggle is around creating profit in their business. And I know that's not really related to value, but some of it is related to value, because for me, there's a really strong thread between how valuable or how much the market perceives you as valuable, and then how much you can charge, and therefore how profitable you are. So I have got a little freebie, which is also on my website, which is a video. So you want to sit through listening to me on that one, which is about ways to improve your profit in your business.
Oh, so that one sounds good. Yeah. My audience will love that. So how can people follow you, Bec?
Come and find me. I do probably spend most of my time on Instagram at Bec Hughes Branding. It's same on Facebook. It's also Bec Hughes Branding, if anybody ever goes there anymore. I am there sometimes. So yes, that's where you can follow me. And I do like to share lots of bits and pieces there for creatives. And then I've got my podcast.
Of course, you have to mention the C Word podcast.
The C Word. I almost forgot about that. My absolute baby, my probably favorite thing to do.
I wasn't going to let you forget about it. Don't worry. I love listening to your podcast, because you share, even though it's targeted for designers, brand developers, web designers, it's the same content that's relevant to photographers. So guys, I urge you to go and listen to the C Word podcast, and you have to type in that full title for it to come up.
You do. The C Word podcast with Bec Hughes. And you can find it on my website too. I'm fairly generic, actually, because my website is just bechughs.com too.
Yes. Nothing wrong with that. It works. It's memorable. It's easy to find you. So, Bec, wonderful conversation today. You shared so much value with my audience. I know they're going to write to me and tell me how great it was, but please also share the love with Bec and let her know that you learned something from her today, because I think that's really nice to hear from the other end, being a guest. But thank you so much, Bec. I loved chatting with you, and I appreciate your time. And until next time, my friends, thanks for being on the Photo Diaries podcast. And thank you, Bec.
Thank you. I've loved our chat, Grace. I really appreciate the invite.
Thanks, girl. I'll catch you later. That's it for today's episode. If you found it valuable, I invite you to leave a review so more people can find this podcast, or simply subscribe to be notified when each new episode drops. Until next time, see you later.